Great. All right. Jim, we're going to be getting started shortly.
Right, we're just missing Senator Ramos. Ramos.
Hey everyone, good to see you all.
Hello.
Nice to see you, Jim.
Hey, Jim.
Right.
All right, I'm going to start
everyone.
broadcasting the
Good to see you
webinar.
all.
Great. All right. Well, since it's 6:02 p.m., since it's 6:02 p.m., I think we are ready to get started. Welcome, everybody, to the 2025 Mayoral Candidates Forum on Preservation Issues. I'm Andrew Berman from Village Preservation. We are one of 10 sponsoring organizations for today's forum, and we have about 25 co-sponsoring organizations, which are listed on your screen. Thank you to all of them for their incredibly important work to help make today possible. All of the sponsors and co-sponsors have reached out to their networks to invite participation, and the sponsors have both reached out to the mayoral campaigns and helped put together the questions which will be asked of the mayoral candidates tonight. A brief word about our format. So we are going to be asking a series of questions, which each of the candidates will get a minute and a half to respond to. The order will be changed each time we ask a question. There will be a clock, so you will be able to see the time clock counting down, and the time limit will be enforced. That will be followed by a 2-minute closing statement allowed for each candidate. We hope to wrap by about 7:30 p.m. We did solicit questions from the public in advance, which informed the questions that are going to be asked this evening. So we will not be taking live questions from the audience. But we do hope that the questions that you hear and the responses that you get from the candidates will be helpful in your learning a little bit more about them, their experience, and their positions on the issues that we're going to be discussing tonight. Tonight's forum will be recorded, and the recording will be shared with everybody who registered for the event, as well as all of the co-sponsoring organizations. So you will be able to get your hands on the recording to see it again and to share it with others. If you do have any technical issues tonight, please email rsvp@villagepreservation.org. And a member of our staff is going to drop that in the chat, so you have that email address, which we will be monitoring if you do have any technical issues. One final note, as most of you know, virtually all of the sponsors of this event tonight are 501c3 organizations. So we are not endorsing candidates or recommending candidates. We are providing candidates with an opportunity to speak to the public and for us to hear from them about their experiences, positions, thinking on various issues. We hope that this will be helpful to you in terms of informing your own understanding of who they are and what they represent. So now, without further ado, and I see, by the way, we already have over 600 participants in the Zoom room, and we're expecting many more as the evening goes on. I am going to hand it over to Peg Breen of the New York Landmarks Conservancy, who's going to be our moderator for the evening. And the Conservancy is one of the sponsors of tonight's event. So Peg, take it away.
Thank you, Andrew. Thanks to everyone who is listening to this and viewing this, and thanks very much to the candidates who have taken the time to be with us tonight. We're very pleased to be joined by former State Assembly Member Michael Breich, author Corinne Fisher, City Comptroller Brad Lander, State Senator Jessica Ramos, former City Comptroller Scott Stringer, and former federal prosecutor Jim Walden. When I start, I'm going to go down the line alphabetically, and then we'll mix up how I call on you. So for openers, the Landmarks Law is celebrating its 60th anniversary this year, and we believe the law has fulfilled the goals Mayor Wagner set out. Preservation has helped the economy, the city's identity, and its quality of life. Tell us about any involvement you have had in preservation. And of course, tell us your favorite landmark. We'll start with Mr. Blake.
Good evening, Peg. Thank you, everyone, for taking the time to be with us on tonight. My name is Michael Blake, and I am running for mayor because we deserve a new generation of leadership to make sure that we're actually honoring our legacy as opposed to taking our history backwards. As you just mentioned, when you talk about the landmarks laws, it's so critical because it ensures that we are preserving our history and what has to happen here in New York City. When thinking about the work that I've been doing over the years, whether it be supporting the work of Arturo Schomburg in Harlem, and of course thinking about the powerful opportunities that are happening in the Washington or otherwise, it's ensuring that we are a part of the history that has to go a step further. When we think about why it's so essential, it is about allowing for our next generations to understand where we have come from. And too often what we have seen is that an absolutely disregard in terms of upzoning other policies is taking away from our communities to ensure that our landmarks are being protected. We have seen a complete failure in this in terms of the Adams administration, unfortunately, where they have not actually taken the time to aggressively make sure there's greater protection that are happening. And so from my work here in previous in the state assembly for 6 years to what we did nationally for 6.5 years with President Obama to what I would like to do as your mayor. In order for us to honor our future, we have to honor our past. And that comes by ensuring that we're honoring our landmarks, and that's what I hope to do by getting the chance at BlakeForNYC.com.
Thank you, Mr. Blake. I have to tell you, you're in a very noisy setting, and it comes through when you're speaking. So I'm not quite sure what you can do about that, but if there's something, please do. Corinne Fisher.
Yes. Hello. Hi, everyone. I'm Corinne Fisher. I'm a candidate that you might not be familiar with. And that's because I'm running on the platform that I'm an everyday New Yorker. I'm a lifelong activist, and I'm coming from the entertainment business. But my favorite landmark is Stonewall. The LGBTQ community is very important to me. I've spent all my time in New York City advocating for them, whether it was phone banking for marriage equality or protesting just a few weeks ago because they're trying to take this T out of Stonewall in our new administration. I think the way that I most closely relate to land preservation is that I'm a consumer of it. I am a person who travels the United States of America for her career. And when I do that, I am always going to see landmarks. They fill me with joy. My mom's a public school teacher, so I always joke that I never actually went on a relaxing vacation. I never laid in a hammock until I was 30 years old. And that's because I was doing things like going to the house where Edgar Allan Poe wrote The Raven, or going to the now 7-Eleven in Baltimore where they created the Ouija board. But these are the things that make our culture our culture. We don't want an entire community that's just filled with delis and condos. We need culture, we need history, we need spirit. We need things that when we walk around and we see plaques, we learn more about the people that built the city that we live in so we can appreciate it. And I am trying to save the Elizabeth Street Garden.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Mr. Lander.
Thank you so much to Peg and Andrew and all the sponsors of this forum. It really is an honor to be here with you. I'm New York City Controller Brad Lander. And I know a lot of you from work together on preservation over the recent decades. For 15 years, I ran the Fifth Avenue Committee and then the Pratt Center for Community Development, helping to preserve a whole bunch of brownstones and old lot tenement buildings that have been abandoned during the abandonment and fiscal crisis, and turn them back into affordable housing and small businesses that strengthen our neighborhoods. There was a time, I know it doesn't feel this way now, when the affordable housing community and the preservation community were deep allies in getting buildings renovated and landmarked and preserved. And I love doing that work with you. Then I chaired the Landmarks Public Siting and Maritime Use Committee of the City Council, and we landmarked several thousand buildings. And I'm going to give you two, they're both in Gowanus, the old ASPCA stables and the BRT power substation that's now Powerhouse Arts, which were both preserved at the time that we were thinking, how could we build a lot of new housing in this and yet preserve some treasures? And if you haven't been to Powerhouse Arts, which is an amazing adaptive reuse of an old BRT substation that is now thriving with industrial arts activity, it really shows we can preserve what's great, even as we make room for growth in New York City.
We gave them a Lucy Moses Award last year and agree with you. It's a great building.
Right on.
Senator Ramos.
Hi, good evening, everyone. I'm New York State Senator Jessica Ramos, proud resident of historic Jackson Heights, the country's first garden city apartments that were made available to people who were looking to move across the river to Queens. I am a four-term state senator who is in awe of the transformation we've experienced in Jackson Heights, being a housing development that was previously unavailable to so many communities, like the Jewish community, like Black people, and like people of color. And yet today has become a modern day Ellis Island, where we welcome people from every walk of life and every corner of this great planet. We happen to now be the most diverse place in the entire world, where we speak more than 200 languages. And I am so proud to be able to continue to serve my community as state senator. I hope to do so as mayor. Prior to my appointment to the previous mayoral administration, I was on the board of the Jackson Heights Beautification Group, where we worked very hard to both landmark those buildings in the 90s and continue to advocate for the protection and restoration of our housing.
Thank you. Mr. Stringer.
Well, first of all, let me thank all the sponsoring organizations for holding this forum today. As I look down the list, I realize I've worked with almost every one of these organizations to preserve and protect communities, but also to balance development and our architectural heritage and history. I believe very strongly that when you think about people's communities, we cherish how we were brought up. We cherish what our communities represent to us. And I think all of you in this conversation tonight have played a major role in that. Going forward, I think it's a message that we're here tonight because we believe that we have to listen to the voices of community, our community boards, the people who think about preservation, think about how we grow communities. And there's always has to be a balance. I've learned a lot from all of you in my time as borough president, whether we landmarked West End Avenue, Historic District, Riverside Drive, some of the iconic buildings that we see today. And, you know, it's hard to pick one because they're really so amazing. I'm going to stick with Manhattan, which is what I know, but whether it's Times Square, the Apollo Theater, we have so many wonderful ways that we can own our heritage and at the same time make way for the next generation of affordable housing. I think we can do both, but I think we have to listen to communities.
Okay. Mr. Walden.
Hi, Peg. Hi, Andrew. Thank you for having me, and thanks to all the organizations that sponsored this. It's obviously super important. I'm going to try to answer the question directly. Favorite landmark, Brooklyn Bridge. Sorry to be trite, but I can never get enough of that. And then in terms of my connectivity to this issue, I think both of you know and understand that after I stopped being a federal prosecutor, I've been a private lawyer for 23 years. And it would have been very easy to kind of stay in my lane and represent companies and individuals in all kinds of cases. But I chose a different path. And I did a tremendous amount of pro bono work for communities that wanted to protect their landmarks and protect their gardens and protect their community gardens. And I've waged a number of those fights, most notably what I thought was a terrible kind of misuse of government power, both federal, state, and local, by the way, over the Tobacco Warehouse and Empire stores. That was a deeply unpopular litigation. It angered a number of people in my community that very much wanted the Brooklyn Bridge Park to proceed without any litigation. We had to fight that fight over 3 different injunctions to get the project stopped. and ultimately won a victory for the community where the project was able to go forward with adaptive use that preserved the history of the spaces while adding parkland and I think resulting in a very good project for everyone.
Mayors can set goals for their Landmarks Commission. Mayor Dinkins encouraged a focus on Harlem. Mayor Bloomberg's commission focused on designation in the boroughs outside of Manhattan. The current commission has established an equity framework to highlight buildings and places in underrepresented communities. What would you want your commission to focus on? In reverse order now, Mr. Walden.
Sure. So my goal would be to help the LPC do its job better. I mean, it's a historically understaffed, under-budgeted entity who's critical to being a vanguard against overdevelopment. I mean, we've lost, if anybody cares to look at the list of historic sites that we've lost, buildings that we've lost, community gardens that we've lost, it's all there on the website. And thank God for the law that slowed that, but it's still we still lose buildings every year. And one of the legacy that I want to have is not necessarily preserving this, that, or the other thing, but empowering the LPC to designate more and to do its job fully. And that's why, as mayor, it's going to be super important to me to fund it well, to make sure it's adequately resourced, and that it can serve the entire city without preference for any certain area or any certain group, but literally to protect our history every place we can.
Okay. Mr. Stringer.
Look, I agree with Jim that funding is a major issue for the Landmarks Commission, but I also think we have to sort of resubmit the mission. Let's face it, landmarking and preservation is not on the civic or public forefront the way it used to be. And I think it's because we're looking at trying to balance the needs of affordable housing with the needs of preservation. And I think we need a mayor who, quite frankly, is going to empower the Landmarks Commission to be part of a city dynamic that thinks to restructure how we view the city landscape, whether it's our streets, whether it's our affordable buildings, whether it's our equity position in all of the city, the landmarks that never seem to get designated in communities of color or the LGBTQ community, but rather it was for a while a Manhattan or Brooklyn Heights thing. I think we can have our cake and eat it too. I think we can explore an empowered Landmarks Commission, but also break down the silos in city government and think about landmarking and the other challenges that we have in the city. We have schools and after-school programs and streets that should be considered for preservation. And yet we also have to think about strategically how we look at a community and say, what's appropriate for preservation? And then what's appropriate for actual expansion of affordable housing? When I was borough president, I always used to say, look, Broadway, build it up. The side streets, try to keep our side streets in context of development.
Ms. Ramos?
Ramos, thank you.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, that's okay. I'm interested in protecting cultural landmarks like small businesses, community centers, houses of worship, and so many different special places for the many diverse communities of New York City across the 5 boroughs. I think it's imperative that we create a community preservation fund that supports especially small landlords and cooperatives that are maintaining landmark buildings in order to expand public funding for repairs and energy efficient retrofits for so many of these historic structures. And it's a big concern that I've been hearing about, particularly in Jackson Heights and other places where we definitely want to comply with many of the local laws that have been passed by the city council, but remain unfunded mandates where many prefer to pay the fine and not make the critical changes that are needed. I believe it's City Hall's duty and responsibility to help them through this very necessary change while we preserve architectural landmarks and other special places for New Yorkers across our city.
Mr. Lander.
One lens I think that's really critical to take is what's at risk. We've lost too many buildings through demolition by neglect, or where we knew there was market appetite and didn't get there fast enough. So one important lens is to say to LPC staff, can we move things to the front of the line that are at risk of being lost if we don't get there? So we don't have more of that. I did value the equity priority. I got to landmark the Louis Armstrong House and a district around it. I think there's a good balance. We love the groups that have the deep organizing in their neighborhoods, and those are all over the city. So we want to work with those groups who have done all this work. I mean, I used to see in my council district this amazing work. People brought the maps to our office and had already done all the surveying. And you want to honor that civic engagement and tradition. I love what the in my neighborhood, the Park Slope Civic Council has done. At the same time, you want to make sure there's a real balance, and neighborhoods around the city that don't have that have some attention paid so that their treasures are also preserved. I think it's important to look at those places where development is taking place and help a better balance take place so that treasures are preserved. And you come out with neighborhoods that have growth so we could have more affordability, but also preserve what is makes those neighborhoods fantastic. And for all of that, more resources are needed so we don't have to make so many tough choices.
Ms. Fisher.
Yeah, absolutely. I think I agree with a lot of the other candidates who are saying we do need to toe the line between affordable housing and preserving these landmarks. I'm sitting right now a couple of blocks away from the synagogue that was home to many Ukrainian immigrants and where they worship. That is now going to become 6 condos. And I don't think that's exactly what we needed in the East Village. We have plenty of condos here, and we're seeing more Starbucks and more condos. And that's not the direction that I want to be headed. I know that transparency is key when it comes to development. So I think it's looking into people who say, I'm going to build affordable housing, and really checking, is that something they're going to do? I know recently there was the Gansevoort Square project that appeared on the surface as an affordable housing proposition, and then it was only for a certain period of time. So we're going to stop lies like that from going to the public. And as I mentioned before, I'm really committed to the Elizabeth Street Garden. New York City only allocates 0.6% of the budget to outdoor green spaces, parks, which is ridiculous. Any other major city is allocating at least 1% to 1.5%. And on the West Coast, we see a lot bigger allocations. These are our community spaces. We don't have backyards here. We don't have front yards. That's where we all come to congregate as a community. And I think New York City needs a lot more of that.
Mr. Blake.
I'm trying to make sure to get better sound here. I'm gonna get to another location in a moment for that purpose, Meg and Andrew. So first and foremost, it's about us understanding the moment that we're in, where there is a continual attack on what's happening around history, in particular cultural history. And so I do think, to your question, we have to be very focused on expanding out a strategy for tourism to the outer boroughs to see the historic landmarks that exist. Second, I do think we have to work very strongly in conjunction with our legal entities to ensure that as changes are happening, that we are not reverting back and losing anything that is associated to racial equity and racial justice, as I mentioned, our tourist board and others, because I'm very concerned about that happening given the environment that we're in and people feeling like that we have to go down that road. Third, and finally, Peg and Andrew, and to everyone on the line, we have to also make sure that the conversations around City of Yes and other expansion is not leading to us having demolitions and expansion of other housing that is therefore leading to us not actually protecting our cultural institutions. We've seen this happen in other cities where they've gone down that wrong road. You have been very accurate in the data you've laid out in saying that, no, we do not necessarily have a shortage just when it comes to housing. We're not effectively having affordable housing. And so therefore, let's work with the LPC to ensure that when there are changes that are happening across our city, we are not losing the cultural legacy and history that we have to have, especially given the environment that we're in right now. We have to be very concerned that we have too many people that are actively saying anything associated with diversity and culture has to be rescinded. That cannot be who we are, because if we do that, it is not just about our racial history. It is about all of the different diversity that we have as a community that could be lost with that change.
Okay. So then, would you support increasing the commission's staff and budget so that they could work with community members in underserved and less resourced neighborhoods to identify and protect the buildings and spaces that matter in those communities? And let's start with Senator Ramos.
Thank you. I really would love to democratize the process of landmarking and make it much more accessible to New Yorkers in working class neighborhoods, and especially to New Yorkers whose main language is not English. There are countless corners of this city that should be considered for landmarking and preservation, but the people living in those neighborhoods aren't necessarily empowered to speak up or knowledgeable of the very lengthy process to landmark a place or an iconic place in their neighborhood. So I would like to invoke a sort of people's history landmarks initiative where we're really considering the different civil rights, labor movement, and tenant struggles that have made a change here in New York to make our city really much more accessible to many people. I think landmarking has wrongfully for a long time been seen as a tool for the elite, and really using it as something for everybody is the better way for us to ensure that we are protecting our spaces as the living history that they are.
Mr. Lander.
Yes, I absolutely support increased resources. When I was a council member, there were groups in multiple neighborhoods in my district who wanted to expand or establish historic districts. And I was essentially told by the LPC, you have to pick one of the three because that's all the resources there are right now. Not based on really anything. They were all worthy for consideration, but it was just understood a council district will only get so much attention. And that's not a good way to have a system. And that also, to Senator Ramos's point, prioritizes those neighborhoods that are, have that done. And I mean, you don't get to neighborhoods with fewer resources or kind of less of a deep tradition of that. And if you want to make sure landmarking is genuinely equitable, you've got to have the staff resources to go be proactive and work with community groups to do it. Finally, also having more staff to review plan and alteration applications in as timely a fashion as possible really helps strengthen the system, because what I find from homeowners is the fear or frustration that they have is that it's going to take too long, they can't get an answer. And if you can help them be confident that their application will get reviewed and they'll get the feedback in a timely way, it really goes a long way to help build support. And for all of that, more resources and more staff are needed.
Mr. Stringer. Oops, you're muted, Scott, for some reason.
I'm sorry. I support an increase in funding. I think we certainly need to increase the staffing because we see the lack of applications getting approved. I think part of it is the pipeline. But I want to throw out something else that I did as Manhattan Borough President that I would implement citywide as mayor. A lot of people who may want to landmark a particular block or create a historic district, unless you are an expert or have a real funding stream behind you, it is very hard to interact with city government and the Landmarks Commission. So when I was Manhattan Borough President, I started a graduate student urban planning program where we put urban planners on every community board in Manhattan. This sort of went beyond Manhattan as well. And the purpose of it was to give communities the sense that the community board was the community center for looking at ways to improve the community, whether it was landmarking, whether it was potholes, whole host of issues. How do we build that out? I do think we should empower our community boards. I do think they deserve an increase in funding, but I also think urban planning is sort of describes what communities are all about. I did this as borough president. I would definitely do it if I was mayor. I think there's a real opportunity to engage communities. Look, if you're Andrew Berman, you know how to landmark. But if you're somebody who is in a different part of the city and doesn't even realize you can landmark a community, you got to go to the community board and speak to an urban planner. You got to go to somebody who can help you build that community. And it doesn't only have to be for people who understand it. I would like to expand it, a knowledge base for everybody. Thank you, Brad.
Mr. Blake.
Absolutely. You can't have a scenario where you have 80 preservationists trying to address 38,000 properties. And so we have to have a greater staffing. We have to have greater budget, greater resourcing, and especially given the environment that we're in itself. And so very directly, yes, it would allow us to reimagine it. And we think about urban planning and the thoughtfulness of this. We have to make sure that there's greater cultural sensitivity of the staff that is being hired. Who are the people that are coming from particular communities? What history do they have? We don't want someone that's having a Robert Moses type of approach, right? We want to have someone that is actually embracing our communities in that particular way. And so for the sake of time and efficiency, yes to your question.
Mr. Walden.
I think I already answered that question in my last, but I'm just going to challenge. Does Berman really know how to landmark something? No, I'm only kidding. I had to say that, Andrew. So I'm going to tie it to what Jessica and Michael said, because I think that this is super important. It's really it's nice to talk about diversity and inclusion as a focus, but we need to put teeth in that. And it's like Jessica's point made me think of Howard Zinn and A People's History of the United States. We really need people on the LPC that really understand the rich diversity of our history and the struggle that should be fairly represented in all of our landmarking, not just kind of the traditional, Brooklyn Bridge, to make fun of myself, portions. And I also think that we have to have, if we're going to talk about more resources for LPC, and this is super important, anyone can just say that we want resources, but we have to figure out a way to pay for it that's sustainable between administrations, because one of the problems with city government is a new administration comes in, they have a new set of priorities, there's a new set of funding problems. So I really think that we should look at some sort of way to pay for LPC's important work that gives them everything that they need to keep the application process going in between, whether it's a surcharge that is related to tourism that is specifically designated for LPC. I'm not sure what the right fit is, but there has to be some way to do it so that we don't go up and down in terms of resources and funding between administrations.
Ms. Fisher.
Yes, I absolutely agree in expanding resources. And to Jim's point, I think we do need to find a way to make that sustainable. So how can we allocate more funds, but also make money? I think there's many native New Yorkers who, maybe stay in their borough or aren't familiar with all the amazing things that New York City has to offer because they're so worried about paying their rent and getting groceries and taking care of their family if they don't have access to childcare. So it's making it really part of tourism, not just for people visiting, but tourism for people within the boroughs. I am really into cross-borough tourism, going to a borough that I haven't explored yet and spending money there and supporting local businesses. I want, tourists who visit here from other states to think, yeah, I'm going to go to the Edgar Allan Poe Cottage in the Bronx. That is something that is part of my NYC journey, not just going to Times Square. And then additionally, it will create more jobs for New Yorkers, and not just any jobs that actually connect them to their community, which I think empowers New York City as a whole.
Housing is, of course, one of the top issues, and some blame historic districts for the lack of affordable housing. Yet after 60 years of designations, only some 5% of city land is under landmarks regulation. So how would you balance creating new housing, promoting adaptive reuse of older buildings, and respecting neighborhood character? Let's start with Mr. Lander.
Thanks, Peg. I love this question. It really is my whole career. I spent 15 years working in nonprofit affordable housing and community development groups whose whole raison d'etre, like they got started because abandonment wiped out the housing and small businesses in their neighborhoods. And then we fought to bring it back and organized residents together who didn't know they were preservationists. They were people in abandoned buildings who just wanted the heat and hot water on. But then they teamed up with local, architects at the Pratt Center and with the Fifth Avenue Committee and brought buildings back to life. And we can have that spirit again. We do need more housing. We haven't built enough housing in the last 15 years, but there are ways to do it that preserve what's great and strengthen neighborhoods. And I've tried to lay out a plan for how I would do that. Starts with a citizens assembly on growth and affordability where people can say, what kind of housing do we need? Rental and ownership, how affordable? And what's needed in neighborhoods to actually strengthen growth. One of those things is renewing the pathway to affordable homeownership. Things like the Old Mitchell Llama program or what big people love and treasure their neighborhoods. That's why I've offered a plan for building 50,000 new affordable units for New Yorkers to own or rent on just 4 of the city's 12 municipal golf courses. There will still be 8. That means we could build new neighborhoods with new great parks and open space and schools and space for small business, and in a way that doesn't jeopardize history, that builds it for the future.
Okay. Mr. Walden.
Okay, so I kind of feel like Brad was leading with his chin a little bit on that golf course thing, but I'll leave that alone, and I'm just going to say this. I kind of feel like I've been in this space not nearly as much as Brad for sure, but I've been in this space enough to know that there's a little bit of a false choice between preservation and housing. There are plenty of tools that we have in the toolbox. Unfortunately, we're not very good at using all the tools that we have, but there's something like 14 individual tools that we can use for housing that doesn't do anything to threaten preservation. And in point of fact, there are places where there are stop signs put up around losing historic buildings now, and really kind of forcing a discussion that didn't happen, even 20, 30 years ago, before all of these great organizations came together to really protect the history of New York City. So I don't really see it as a conflict between them. I think that there is a way to protect all of our history and gardens. And Corinne, I forgot to say thank you for Elizabeth Street Garden. That's an incredibly important mission of yours. And I think that we can build plenty of housing, including the housing that Brad wants to put on golf courses, with the land and the resources that we have now.
Okay. Ms. Fisher.
Yes, absolutely. Hi. So I am very into being transparent. I talked about that earlier. So I think part of the thing that we need to do is a lot of politicians come in with these great intentions that they're going to be advocates for land preservation and also affordable housing, but then they get into talks with real estate developers and they end up, being dazzled by the commerce and the luxury housing. And they're thinking about the next time that they're running for office and they need that real estate developer money. I am coming in here promising not to do any of those things and promising that the number one thing that we will get done is making affordable housing for New Yorkers while preserving the communities around that housing. One of the tenets of my platform is that I am going to cap rent for small businesses. So hopefully that is keeping people in the communities that they want to preserve, not just seeing a Chick-fil-A and a Starbucks. And then additionally, stabilizing rent for people and expanding that so that they can stay in the same place that they're working at. And and my signature program is tax breaks for New Yorkers who volunteer at nonprofits. So that's a way to get more people into land preservation without actually having to allocate funds. So you're just getting New Yorkers involved, and it's basically free.
Right. Mr. Blake.
We cannot continue to allow the narrative of the need for more housing to lead to someone saying, well, we have to lose out on preservation. Let's make sure we're addressing something that you all have stated repeatedly. It's about affordable housing. And how do we create that and sustain that while also not losing on our history? And in order to achieve that, we do several things. First, I'm going to give Scott his credit here, because usually I say Mitchell Llama 2.0, and then he'll say that he said it first before me. So we're getting better about that there. I fundamentally do believe that there has to be a new imagination around affordable housing that is dedicated around working class housing in that regard. Now, something that did not happen within City of Yes. Not only did they not address the supply and demand question, they didn't address the affordability question. And so in order to do that, I fundamentally do believe we need to have a LMI. We need a local median income, not an area median income, because it doesn't make sense to me that we're assessing what's happening in Westchester County and other counties as it relates to the affordability that's happening here in New York City. In order then to do that, we know we have enough space. We know we have enough capacity to be able to build and make sure to build effectively while not losing out on the buildings that we have currently. We should not be going down the road, as we've been seeing, of the demolishing and elimination of communities for the purpose of trying to have market rate homes. That doesn't make any sense at all, because naturally what you will do is a gentrification and displacement of the community that will be in those places. And so to the broader approach, you have to make sure it's truly affordable. You have to make sure you're actually building more. You have to make sure that you're also building with communities that represent our communities, do it effectively and do it well.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Ramos.
Preservation without displacement is the mission. And I believe this is why it's so important to tie landmarking to strong tenant protections in order to prevent landlords from using preservation as an excuse to displace particularly longtime residents. And I go back to my community preservation fund idea that would help a lot of small landlords and co-ops, HDFCs, be able to maintain their buildings while keeping rents affordable. To me, this is even an opportunity to use many of the vacant landmarked buildings that are going underused to be repurposed for affordable housing opportunities. And the city would play a great role in being able to do that, fast tracking adaptive reuse projects that would turn these historic buildings into affordable housing, even schools, the childcare centers that we will need for universal childcare, public spaces, arts, workforce housing, and so on and so forth. We have a great wealth of area to leverage in order to help New Yorkers keep calling our city home.
Mr. Stringer.
Look, I'm a lifelong New Yorker, and I know one thing about our people. We hate when we are not given a voice in what's happening in our community. So I want to go back to something that we used to talk about a lot. We just don't talk about it anymore. It's called community-based planning. 59 community boards with all the different diversity and challenges in terms of transportation, housing, landmarking, building in more density for affordable housing. All of these issues should have a platform for discussion in our neighborhoods. And that's not happening today. You know, the edict comes down from City Hall and all neighborhood thought is pushed aside. I'm going to change that if I become mayor. And to pivot to my ranked choice friend, Michael Blake, about Mitchell-Lama 2.0, I do think we have an opportunity to build the housing that we need for affordability. You know, can't we just talk for 1 minute about affordable housing? And how would I do it? Well, I audited 2 audits that identified 1,000 properties that were city-owned parcels. And this is the land that can be used for Mitchell-Lama 2.0. We give the land to community-based organizations, to developers that are not looking for an insane profit. We start doing what LaGuardia did and what Lindsay did with Mitchell-Lama in public housing. We don't have to be minimalists anymore. Yes, we can preserve and protect our communities, but we can expand our housing stock on city-owned land. And if the parcels of land cannot be used for housing, this is the time we build community gardens and open space and parks for kids.
Well, it seems that a lot of the housing proposals are based on the premise that if you allow developers to build larger buildings, that there'll be some affordable units there. But you've touched upon another question, and that is, why wouldn't the government focus on the groups that actually want to do affordable housing, like LISC or Enterprise or the Community Service Society? So you kind of started that round. So let's go to Jim Walden.
Yeah, so the community-based groups are obviously one tool in the toolbox, but I don't take such a hostile view to sensible developers. And I think that the development community often gets knocked in these conversations. But let's remember, it's the related company that's doing that the Chelsea Elliott project. And there's a lot more that we need from our development community. So I think we win when we have balance, right? We win when we have oversight over developers to make sure they're doing a quality job and not bilking development projects and being responsible. We win when we partner with community-based organizations to give them a seat at the table and to help stop gentrification and displacement, which are really critically important for our communities. And so, if I'm lucky enough to win, I'm going to have balance among and between all these people so that we can build appropriately. We have to be ambitious. If we're going to get to the goals that keep us alongside cities in the United States that are doing a better job than us, and cities like Ottawa that are outpacing us as well, we're going to have to be a little bit more ambitious. But again, I think it's a false choice to say we can't have it by including everyone at the table.
Okay, Mr. Lander?
When I was in the city council, I drafted and carried a bill called Public Land for Public Good, which says when land is city owned and it's disposed for affordable housing, it should go to a nonprofit or a community land trust that will preserve it permanently as affordable housing. That bill is now carried by Lincoln Ressler, and I would support it as mayor. There is indeed, as Jim says, an important role. Most of the land is privately owned, and therefore we have to work with the folks who own it. Like Corinne, I don't take contributions from for-profit real estate developers because I want to be able to partner in ways that have the public interest at heart and make sure we're really getting the best possible deal. There is a lot of suspicion, but we do need all hands on deck for the growth we need. So that's why I believe in public land for public good, why I led two nonprofit affordable housing groups for 15 years who do exclusively affordable housing and keep it permanently affordable. And I'll stick my chin out again, Jim, because this really is the reason why the golf courses make sense. And people could come at that proposal if they want, but 8 municipal golf courses will be plenty to get tee times. But there's 2,500 acres of city-owned land, and that's where you get the Mitchell-Lama 2.0. That's what you get permanently affordable rental and homeownership housing. Mitchell-Lama was built on publicly owned land because you can, with the land basis low, you can make great things happen in great new communities.
Thank you. Ms. Fisher?
Okay, well, I'm not going to be as nice about real estate developers. I feel like we have plenty of housing for people who are rich here. People have multiple houses. People have houses that they can sneak on Airbnb. I think the Democratic Party isn't really talking about affordable housing as a crisis, and it's a crisis. If you don't have a home, you need a home now. You don't need a home next week. You don't need a home next month. You don't need a home next year. You need it now. That's first and foremost. The government, politicians shouldn't have to tell each other that people need to live in houses. And it's become this talking point where we're being made fun of. Democratic cities provide less affordable housing than conservative cities. That's a talking point that we're getting made fun of right now nationally, and that shouldn't be the case. And it's because we often get bogged down with policy, and we don't want to insult anyone. We don't want to step on anyone's toes. We don't need to bulldoze down landmarks to do this. We simply have to stand up to real estate developers and people, quite frankly, in the Democratic Party who want affordable housing, but they're NIMBYs. They don't want it in their backyard. If people need to be housed, it needs to be anywhere and everywhere in this city that we have available space.
Ms. Ramos?
I think we're right to be skeptical of big real estate when the many tax abatements that are provided in exchange for the prospect of affordable housing haven't really materialized in a serious dent to the need that we have for truly affordable housing. And I resent plans that would allow the raising of Chelsea houses, for example, or what is taking place in the Brooklyn Marine Terminal, where big real estate may get a huge land grab where we can actually prioritize us building lasting, not only affordable housing, but homes, taking into account not only the quantity of affordable housing that's needed, but also the quality of it. And this is why I carry the Jobs and Housing Bill in the New York State Senate that I would be able to do outright as mayor, leveraging our union pension funds with our taxpayer dollars in order to replicate the success of Penn South and Co-op City and Electchester. But let me say that the jobs that are created by this housing are equally important, and why labor standards should be attached to ensure that we are allowing the people who make this housing possible to be able to afford to live in New York City and not make the mistake of the Gowanus rezoning and others. Thank you.
Mr. Blake.
I appreciate your question, Peg. It's because at the end of the day, it cannot just be about building more itself. That's not just addressing the core issue itself. It's about ensuring how do we build and how do we have affordability and how do we do it well for our communities at the same time. It is not a scenario where you're just empowering developers alone to effectively do what they need to do. Now, let's be very clear. You have to work in conjunction with developers to actually build out what's happening here. But I do think we have to be clear that we should not allow for incentives to stay with developers if they're not actually implementing affordable thresholds that have been given to them. We have not actually looked at rescinding back many of those benefits. In particular, when we think about how dollars are being utilized across the city for supposed affordable housing that then is not happening. And so it is wrong and it's harmful to us. It is impossible for us to preserve our history and our legacy if you have a scenario where displacement is occurring because of market rate gentrification. And so to that degree, we have to be very intentional to that regard. And while understanding that we cannot, though, harm the small mom and pop entities that are still struggling right here. Too often, what is happening is that the developer conversation is taking on a hold and not accounting for the small multifamily individuals who are trying to do it the right way, who are not actually trying to just profit for the purpose of just hurting communities, but are actually trying to do it for the people. And so we have to have two different distinctions in how we approach this, with the understanding, though, that if we do not change the policy structure around LMI versus AMI, as well as the incentives that are going to developers, then that is where we will actually harm ourselves and actually help ourselves for the better.
Okay. You know, all the groups asked their members to send in questions, and we couldn't get to all of them. We tried to do themes, but most of them focused on specific neighborhood issues. So I'm going back to community input because it is so important to New Yorkers. And yet programs like the City of Yes really limit their ability to have an impact. Even LPC, in an attempt to speed up the process, does a lot more at staff level, and it's really limiting the times for the community board and the public to weigh in. So again, with all of this, and in some cases, when you say about neighborhood character, it's almost becoming a dirty word. And it isn't. So how do you let the people who live and love this city have a say in how their neighborhoods evolve as they will? Let's start with Mr. Lander.
Thanks, Peg, and I apologize. It's going to have to be my last answer because I have to get to one more event, but I really want to thank you for convening this forum and asking the tough questions, and I hope folks will see who is here and who isn't here. There are some other candidates in this race who I don't think have any interest in or, we're partnering or working with the preservation communities, so I hope you'll think about that as you guys make your decisions. I'll say a couple of things here. First, I really like what Scott said about community-based planning. I worked at the Fifth Avenue Committee and the Pratt Center, and the Pratt Center for Community Development, that's what it's all about. And I really believe these things go together. What I have proposed is to do a citizens assembly on growth and affordability to get New Yorkers involved in shaping a framework for the balance we're talking about tonight. We need more affordable housing. That means we need more housing. And we want it in neighborhoods that we love, that preserve their treasures and are great places to live in. And so that's a citywide framework, but then you need the communities to be able to engage and shape what happens. And I guess I know not everybody on this call might think that the Gowanus rezoning was the cat's meow, but I'd invite you to come out and take a look. We preserved a whole bunch of great buildings. Go to public records and see what became of the old ASPCA building. Go to Powerhouse Outs. Go ask the tenants at Gowanus and Wyckoff houses who are getting a comprehensive modernization of their homes, even as we're adding 8,000 units of housing, 3,000 of them genuinely affordable, 100 affordable artist studios. It is possible both to achieve affordability and growth and preserve and strengthen great neighborhoods, mostly because the people on this call are working hard to make it happen. And I'm really grateful for the time with you tonight.
All right, and thank you for joining us.
See you, Brad.
Okay, Ms. Ramos?
I'm sorry, can you repeat the question?
Sure. When we asked our members, all the groups of
About the
sponsors,
community.
members, there was a real emphasis on community participation and community having a say in their neighborhoods.
Yes. No, thank you. I had a little bit of a glitch here in my connection, but look, I'm a former community board member like my father before me. And in working class communities like mine, there's actually often skepticism, even from institutions like Pratt and other academia. I think, like every New Yorker, we just don't like being told what to do. And I think the solution lies in the process and ensuring that all stakeholders are able to work together. I confess that I resent former Mayor Michael Bloomberg for defunding so many of our community development corporations, and really giving that the revival it deserves in order to put more resources in the hands of New Yorkers to decide how to leverage the 1,000 lots that are available and vacant across the 5 boroughs, to ensure that we are building in a way that is responsive to what the community wants. And so many times it's developers who come and visit our communities to tell us what they would like to build, what is feasible, and being able to reverse that and allow our communities to put out RFPs of sorts so that we can find those who want to make the right investments in our community is what is going to allow New Yorkers to believe in that in our processes, and ensure that they are both efficient and responsive to our needs.
Thank you. Mr. Walden.
Sure. As a lawyer who has encountered the same thing again and again and again, projects that the community hated, the community board voted against, and it went through anyway. I really think that the only way to change this, and I'm not going to be able to do it as mayor, but I'm going to try, is to change ULURP. I mean, ULURP really doesn't work for anyone, and honestly, the people that it should work for are the community boards. And so I'm looking hard at that to try to figure out ways that we can propose legislation that actually give community boards more of a say and more standing and more sway over what happens during the ULURP process. To make it like, because right now it's my experience has been, having attended so many public meetings, it's a box checking exercise that doesn't really do a hell of a lot of good for anyone. So that's the way that I think is going to be the best for the community boards, to have some sort of sustained change that again is sustained between mayoral administrations, so that there's lasting change where they have some control in the courts over what happens in their communities.
Thank you. Mr. Stringer.
Well, let me respectfully disagree with Jim about the role of community boards during ULURP. Fun fact, I was the first teenager in New York City appointed to a community board by then Borough President Percy Sutton. It made
Just yesterday.
It made the front page of the New York Times below the fold. And so I've been associated with community boards as an assembly member, as borough president, as controller. And here's what I always felt about community boards, especially when I was Manhattan Borough President. Community boards do have somewhat of a parochial view about the community, which makes sense. You're 50 people, you're appointed, you know the community backwards and forwards, but the EULA process then shifts to the planning commission and then the borough president that also begins to look at the citywide view or the borough view. And I think that before we minimize what the community says, I think we should just sort of look at this process, because when it works, it really works well. When communities would come to me as borough president and say, we hate this project, I would say, well, what would make you like it? And then they would say, well, we want these 20 things, go negotiate it. And sometimes that worked very well. So I just want to put that out there. But in the time that I have left, I want to mention that I think it's very important that we stop being minimalists. I mean, this is the greatest city in the world. We have a $114 billion budget. City Hall has so many people on the payroll who could do land use zoning. Let's empower a comprehensive public review of where we should be as a city as it relates to development and moving forward.
Okay. Ms. Fisher.
Absolutely. I love this question. As I said before, my platform is all about being a regular, everyday New Yorker who's running for office. And as mayor, I absolutely promise to talk to the public energetically, empathetically, and often. We live in an age of technology where, how many of us are meeting right now? We have 634 people in this Zoom meeting right now. We have the technology to meet often and meet with constituents. We have absolutely no excuse not to. I know it's hard. Well, my favorite part of the campaign so far has been going out and shaking New Yorkers' hands and saying, what can make New York City better for you? It's a very simple question that I think we only ask while we're campaigning. And then once we're elected, we don't ask it anymore. But again, we have the technology to do it. So I won't be checking in just when it's time to do the state of the city, because I'm your representative. And of course it matters what you think. What I've learned throughout this process, which I assume to be so, was that so much policy and politics happen outside of the public eye. And it's not like the public doesn't care. It's not that they don't want to be invested in their communities. But I truly believe a lot of times being involved in your community becomes a second job. It becomes a luxury. And when you can't pay your rent and you can't take care of your children, you can't afford your groceries, you don't have the time to do that. So we need to make community meetings accessible, not just for people who read city and state every day. We have Instagram, we have Zoom. People can meet for free whenever they want, and we can talk about all the issues at hand.
Yeah. And Mr. Blake.
Our communities feel lost right now by what's going on in DC. They feel disgusted by what's going on with Eric Adams and even more so with Andrew Cuomo. And so at the end of the day, we have to make this a point of an increased opportunity for people to be a part of the process. It's the reason why I've said to the question, and Scott would have benefited from this, I would say, that we should have civics, financial literacy, and mental health for every student before they graduate. If you do that, you will increase the likelihood of more champions like Jessica who understand this, because she was a staffer in City Hall and understands it now as an elected official. When you do this, you're able to embrace more people to be a part of the table. And at the end of the day, when you have so many people who feel absolutely appalled by what is going on in government, where they are turning off their TVs and checking out from the news, it is leading to us not having a greater opportunity in embracing our history as it comes to preservation. Because of that challenge, we will lose the institutional legacy that many can give to us. And unfortunately, we'll go down a road of not being able to embrace our future in a better path.
The Landmarks Commission has the power to take neglectful building owners to court, though they don't use it very often. And preservationists have seen an increasing number of historic buildings being demolished due to years of neglect, malice, or even unsafe work. What would you do to reverse this trend? Ms. Ramos.
Well, first and foremost, we have to make sure that all of the respective city agencies are fully staffed. One big criticism of this current administration, and I know there are many, is that whether it's HPD, DOB, or any other, doesn't have enough people to ensure that we are dispatching inspectors, keeping up with the maintenance of buildings, and that is critical to striking that balance of both preserving the city's history, but also allowing for the organic evolution of our city. So I want to make sure sure that we are budgeting for the job titles that would help us achieve this mission, and encourage New Yorkers to sign up to become civil servants across all of the different disciplines that are available, so that we can hold bad landlords accountable, absentee landlords accountable, using even eminent domain as a tool in extreme circumstances to make sure that we are respecting and uplifting our history, or our architectural history as New Yorkers, and even provide good jobs in doing so.
Okay. Mr. Walden, again, the question is, what can the city do to prevent needless demolition of historic buildings?
An easy question for a litigator. How about go to court? Right. So there really, I mean, there are three things that that I would want my administration to do, and consistent with a little bit of what Jessica just said, which is number one, zero tolerance for demolition by neglect when it comes to our historic buildings. Period. Full stop. Right. Among the other changes that there needs to be to LPC is kind of enforcement attorneys that are going to protect our historic places from this. Secondly, is to change the law to appoint kind of LPC guardians over vulnerable buildings where there has been some history of neglect, even if it falls short of demolition by neglect, so that there are dedicated eyes to those buildings. And number three, and this goes, I think maybe I'd be a little bit more muscular than what Jessica implied, but she didn't really develop the idea as much as she wanted to because of the time sensitivity. But we've got to take buildings back from people that really want to take part of our history away for their own profit. And whether it's developers or it's building owners, if it's clear that we're going to lose a treasured landmark, if we leave it in certain hands, then we got to take it back, and we'll pay fair compensation for sure, or else we'll be taken to court. But we have to use all three of those tools.
Okay. Mr. Blake.
Got to take him to court. Got to agree with Jim on this, full stop. But then we got to go further. We have to take away the economic incentives for those who are not doing it correctly. It doesn't make sense to me at all that we continue to allow for a developer and or a landlord to hold on to an incentive who did not actually implement what they were supposed to be getting in the first place. If you do that, you will restore trust and you will actually have greater accountability. Second, you have to expand out the true thresholds so that on the front end, you're actually addressing affordability as opposed to hoping that will happen. Right now, what is occurring is that people have to effectively be too rich or poor enough to have access to homes. And the reason why this is relevant to the cultural preservation is you have a mindset that is occurring of essentially, let's just eliminate what's happening in the city to make more money, as opposed to how are you preserving our history and expanding from here. And so I just think it goes through a broader dynamic of holding people accountable, understanding the power of our legalities, understanding the economic incentives as well as economic accountability. And I will actually go a step further to tie to the question, as we've been talking about housing and preservation intertwined. I do think we have to reimagine what's happening collectively. And while it may not seem connected, I think this goes back to why we have to ban using credit scores for rent and home ownership applications and use that same kind of approach in all that we're doing around preservation and housing collectively.
Okay. Ms. Fisher?
I also agree that neglectful property owners should be taken to court. I think that happens not often enough. We need a renewed sense of personal responsibility. I mean, everywhere, but in culture in general, we are responsible to the community for the properties that we own. It's no different than if you own property and you're part of an organization, a homeowners organization, and you all have to keep your lawn looking nice. Like, we have that responsibility as people who own property in New York. And I think to make sure that people aren't neglectful of their properties, that we have watchdogs. And I understand that elected officials can't keep an eye on every building in the city. That's an impossibility. But guess who can be watchdogs? New Yorkers. No one loves being watchdogs more than New York residents. I have a little piece on my website where people can tell me what's happening in New York. And I get hundreds of messages every day. New Yorkers love doing this. They love saying what needs change and what needs to be looked after. And we as elected officials need to pay attention to what the people who voted for us are saying. And this goes back to the government's misuse or underuse of technology. We can have watchdogs who can access an online portal for every part of the government, with interns checking it just to see like what is actually going on, so we don't continue to exist in this tiny bubble of New York City politics and are constantly engaging with the community around us.
Mr. Stringer.
Look, I think sometimes you have to prevent something bad from happening. And because of technology and because of laser focus, it's not just the Landmarks Commission that I would sort of shift or say it's their responsibility to watch out for buildings that may be demolished. I think that by using data from the Department of Finance, from looking at property tax payments, we could pretty much, with a little effort, figure out which buildings are in jeopardy of being demolished or collapsing under the weight of finance. And that's exactly what I think the the Landmarks Commission should also be charged with, which is to work with landlords who may have financial hardship, who may think that the only way out is to walk away. You know, we saw this kind of abandonment at different points in our city's history where they just walked out. And I think we really should do everything we can with an early warning trigger system to preserve these buildings first and foremost. I have said I have a Robin Hood plan to take buildings away from landlords that are just putting people in squalor and dangerous situations. I have no problem with that. But I also think we have to help people as well keep those properties. A lot of people, when a building is landmarked, may not fully understand exactly what it means for their building. They're not necessarily all big developers who have 20 lawyers on staff. Some people are struggling. And I think as we expand around the city, we look at different people who will have opportunities to preserve their communities, we also have to do our due diligence to help them before something happens.
Okay. A final question. On behalf of all the groups sponsoring us tonight, we have a favor to ask. The Landmarks Law specifies certain professions that need to be represented on the Landmarks Commission. But in 1965, preservation wasn't a profession. There were no preservation schools. People didn't call themselves preservationists. And so when you're mayor, will you please add a preservationist to the commission? Ms. Ramos?
Oh, absolutely. I think making sure that we have a wealth of knowledge in order to respect the historic nature of the buildings that we're going to seek to protect is paramount. We don't just need architects or even historians and city planners. We have to make sure that it is representative of the professions and the expertise that is needed, and that it also reflect the diversity of our 5 boroughs in order to have a real citywide approach.
Mr. Blake?
Absolutely. It's the way to ensure that we don't lose our history, especially given what is happening right now across the country. And when we think about it, not just from the physical standpoint, it's the mental and institutional knowledge that could be lost as well. When you have right now a dynamic of people going after with anti-Blackness, Islamophobia, anti-Semitism, attacking our Latino communities, we will see loss of information. And so, yes, not only will I say there must be a preservationist, but they have to be given the resources to make sure they're able to execute it at scale and to make sure that we're digitizing that history so it's being amplified at a broader degree as well.
Mr. Stringer?
Yes. And, you know, it goes to sort of what went wrong in the Adams administration, which was, you know, the next mayor is going to have to rebuild multiple agencies, whether it's landmarks, HPD, housing. You know, we have a lot of these agencies. I think Jessica mentioned it, just in terms of, you know, being people walking out and not participating because this government kind of shut down. And I think we all agree that, you know, as mayor, we really have to reconstitute this government and put the best and the brightest people of different means, of different diverse experiences and opinions. And I think that's going to be the exciting part of rebuilding our city, after chaos from Adams and potential chaos from Cuomo, it would be nice to just simply run a government for the people of the city. And I think we're all excited about that.
Mr. Walden?
Yeah, but I'm going to choose two of my old clients, Berman and Breen. So you guys can serve together. No, I'm serious though about this. If we were talking about the NYPD and you said, will you appoint a cop to the NYPD? It's like, honestly, preservationists should be the majority. I mean, that's what the agency's there for. So the answer is is violent agreement with everyone that's gone so far, and I assume everyone that will go after me.
Well, that's you, Miss Fisher.
Well, then I violently also agree. I think that we not only need one preservationist, but multiple preservationists, because I think anytime you have someone in a singular position without people to watch out for them, without checks and balances, that's how you get into a sticky situation. That's how you get into people owing favors or having bias to a certain community. So yes, I promise not only one preservationist, but a handful of preservationists. If we're the greatest city in the world, how can we not preserve the greatest city in the world? I think I love running for mayor because I get to just talk very openly about how I think we are the greatest city in the world, and no one else can get offended. Thank you.
Okay, well, now it's time for closing statements, and we're going back to our alphabetical order. So, Mr. Blake.
Thank you, Andrew, and everyone. Thank you for the opportunity to be with you. It has been an absolute blessing. Let's be very clear that we deserve better. We deserve more in our city. We deserve a new generation of leadership. We deserve to focus on not just the preservation of our history, but to go a step further. It's why we have to have the focus on the true cost of living, how we have to have actual affordable housing, how we have to have public safety, public education, public transportation all work at the same time, but ensure that our buildings and our culture are embraced in this moment. If you are ready for a new generation of leadership, and for someone who has experience at all three levels, from a local leader, from someone who has worked as an assembly member, and also in the White House, I am your candidate. We are here to bring different, bring change, and bring something new. If you want to learn more, I ask that you go to our website at blake4nyc.com.
All right, we're not supposed to do that, so just leave out your website and tell us why you want to be mayor. As nonprofits, we have to kind of keep a neutral stance. So thank you, though. The rest of that was great. All right, Ms. Fisher.
Thank you again for the opportunity to meet all of you and listen to your ideas and concerns this evening. I think all of us agree that protecting our city's rich history is not only our shared goal, but our responsibility as good stewards for those who live in the city today, and our duty to those who built this city before us. This city is being suffocated by the cost of living, and too many New Yorkers are suffering at the hands of the affordable housing crisis. Because of this, we need to expand affordable housing and bring rent stabilization to small businesses so they can thrive. Yes, we need to build in order to meet the city's needs. However, this must not come at the cost of erasing our history. Men and women that built this city should be honored, and their legacy should and will be respected when I become your mayor. In the past, we have seen time and again that politicians have let us down and become more concerned with the profits promised by large developers that came at the cost of those struggling, a fact everyone in this forum has seen firsthand. So I pledge that as your mayor, I will put New Yorkers first, protecting our history and building, most importantly, a more affordable future for everyone. Thank you for your time.
Ms. Ramos.
Thank you. I want to thank all of the organizers for bringing us all together to talk about this very important topic that is top of mind for many New Yorkers. I want to be able to use preservation as a tool for justice, for stability, for cultural pride, and ensure that the landmarking process is one that works for everyone, really bringing it down to the community boards and to the communities themselves in order to ensure that preservation does happen without displacement, and that we are repurposing our history for the public good. And to me, there's no greater place that exemplifies that than the many neighborhoods that would be very, very different had Robert Moses gotten his way. And of course, to think of what Greenwich Village would be today if there was a highway running through it and not this beautiful neighborhood that we're all able to enjoy. Really is a postcard of what is possible when we listen to the Jane Jacobs of the world instead of the Robert Moses of the world, who are looking to put profit above the beautiful history and the beautiful mosaic that New Yorkers have created in the 5 boroughs. I'm running not only on real affordable housing, but also on mental health services in order to get our public safety right, and on universal childcare, many of which I think would happen in many of these vacant landmarked buildings that should be enjoyed by our children, so that they understand their history and so they understand how important it is to preserve the beautiful architecture in our city as they become the adults and stewards of our city themselves. Thank you for your time tonight.
Mr. Stringer.
Well, thank you, Peg, and thank you, Andrew, and thank you to all the sponsoring organizations. Some of you I've worked with for longer than I'm going to admit, and it's really great to see this amazing crowd on this Zoom tonight. This is a lot of people caring about our city, so I just want to say thank you for including me in this discussion. Look, like so many of you, I got skin in this game. It's not just about me. It's about the 2 kids I'm raising in middle school. They're public school kids. And I want them to live in a city that is safe. I want them to live in a city where they will have economic opportunity. But I also want them to enjoy what this New York represents. And it really is an extraordinary place. And unfortunately, by the time this mayor shuts down his administration, we're going to be in a very difficult place. We're going to have to literally rebuild the city. We're going to have to build the government. We're going to have to look at every agency. We're going to have to think about what are the priorities for the city. If I'm mayor, those priorities are going to include our communities and our neighborhoods. And as somebody who has had a long career in government, I think experience matters in this race. I think competence matters in this race. Vision is critical, but this is not going to be an easy journey as we move forward. We got to have someone who can play chess, not checkers, with Donald Trump. We have to have someone who has experience navigating the halls of Albany. A lot of New York City dreams die in Albany, and I know Jessica and others have fought very hard to keep the New York City agenda alive, but it's going to take a mayor, not just with a bully pulpit, but with real skills to make this fight. I'm off the sidelines because I believe in this town, and I think I can build a government that can make us proud. We can focus on housing and education. We can also protect our seniors while also ushering the next generation of our children. So thank you for giving me this opportunity, and I hope to see you out in the streets, at the subways, and let's have that great discussion.
Mr. Walden.
Wow, I get the final word. But let me say 3 things with my time. Number one, thanks to Andrew and Peg and all the sponsors and all the people that are here. It's really wonderful that so many people care this much. Number 2, thanks to my fellow candidates. Believe me, people, running for office is not easy. It's a 24/7 job. Everyone's giving it their all. And really, it's an honor to be here among all of you. And number 3, about myself, I'm running as an independent, not a Democrat. I'm doing that as a matter of conscience. I've fought everyone. I mean, over the course of a long time, I've sued more agencies than I can shake a stick at. I've fought just about every battle that you can fight. And I did it when I wasn't trying to gain anything. I wasn't trying to run for office. I wasn't trying to make friends. I was trying to do right by communities, preservation groups, school children who are being bullied, the indigent who are kicked off food stamps. It's just something that is an homage to, a difficult circumstance that I grew up in, and I wanted to make a difference. And I cared about preservation when really nobody else did. I fought repeatedly for a lot of the people, not a lot, but a whole bunch of the groups that are on this to save not just historic sites, parks, and community gardens. And honestly, when it comes to places like Elizabeth Street Garden, I'm the one person that said, I'm going to do everything that in my power to make sure that community gardens get the same legal protection as parks, because I think that green spaces are super important, which is the only reason I was teasing Brad. I'm not a golfer, but I do believe in green spaces. So sorry, he's not here to defend himself. But in any event, I care about these things. I'm fighting for New York really because I agree with Scott. We need competent leadership with a standard of excellence that will not drag us into disgrace. And I've got a 30-year record to run on. So thank you, everyone. Just under the wire there.
Thank you all so much for taking the time to be with us this evening. And I think we had some really intelligent and interesting responses from all of you. And I think you can tell from the sponsorship and the viewership that preservation matters to New Yorkers, and it needs to matter to the next mayor.
Absolutely. And Peg, thank you so much for moderating. Let me also extend my gratitude to all of the candidates. We had 6 candidates here tonight, which, if I'm not mistaken, is a lot more than a lot of the other forums that have taken place. So we really appreciate your participation. We had about 800 attendees come through now tonight, which is great. And we know many more people registered, but we're not able to show up. Everybody just, you'll get an email with a link to the video. All of the participating organizations will as well. It's actually already up on Village Preservation's YouTube page. So please do share this. And thank you all for your contributions to this conversation.
And thanks to everybody who listened in and watched.
Yes, thank you.